Sometimes we have two sets of data that we want to compare, and yet they are very different in how large they are. Let's come up here and I'll click on it and Control A again to include the titles, and we'll insert that into just a basic chart. Well, you can see the total transactions, but we can hardly see any difference in units sold because the numbers are so different in size. So I'm going to click on the total transactions, come over here and say put it on a secondary axis. Now the total transactions are on the axis on the right and the units sold on the left, but they're totally overlapping each other, so I could either move them apart or maybe I'll use one as a line and one as a bar. Let's do that. We'll click on this and say change series chart type. Yeah, here's one that came up in the custom ones that has this in it, and that's real. You can change it down here, you can see as well. I'll come over here and that one's better because it's got both sides on it. If not, if I had chosen this one, let's just do that, then I would have to go back and right click on this and say secondary axes. And now I have something where I can see the units sold and how that compares with the total transactions. On the Trendlines tab, I want to talk about prediction. Of course, we could create a slope, an intercept. You'll notice this has curlicues around it, which means it's an array. We'll talk about arrays later on. We also have formulas to help us for the R-squared value. Using those three values, we can predict what the future is going to hold. Also, Excel has a trend line that can show this type of information, and we can put it into the future. But today we want to focus on charts and how we can work with them to get that information. I often will use a chart rather than go through the process of finding the slope and intercept separately. To do that, we'll highlight both the X and Y's and create a chart from them. I'm going to insert a chart. However, if I did just a line chart, it would be fine for this problem, but would run into problems if our data wasn't evenly spaced. Here the x-axis is exactly one apart, 1, 2, 3, very even. So instead, it's a good habit to get into to include a scattergram and select lines with it. Now, if my data were 1, 2.5, 2.75, 3.5, 4.25, and so forth, it wouldn't matter because it doesn't need to be evenly spaced, and I'll still have an appropriate slope and intercept when I get done with the trend line. Next, to create the trend line, I'll right-click on my data and add trend line. That now has found what that is, and I can show that equation by simply coming over here in the Format Trend Line, say display the equation and display the R-squared value. Let's move them down where we can see them. In addition, I can also go forward however many periods, say 2 periods here. You'll notice the information I need is here, but I've graphed it also at the same time. I find this very useful because I'm doing both at the same time and I'm able to visualize what's happening. In addition, we can also look at other options, exponential, logarithmic, polynomial, power, and so forth, but in this case linear is what we'll stick with. I hope that you've enjoyed learning how to work with charts and that you will make it your own by using them and beautifying the charts that you use.